Hey, what's up? Hello. Today we are gathered here to talk about this lounge set that I made. I also made one for my bestie Alyssa. Hers is light blue. So this video is going to be a little so long of how I made this hoodie. So before we begin sewing, you're going to need to wash, dry, and iron your fabric. Also download the patterns, which are linked in the description, and then assemble the patterns and cut out the pattern pieces. This took me about an hour and a half total to print, tape, and cut both patterns. So for the hoodie and for the shorts. So make sure you do all of that before you begin sewing. So materials and supplies. You're gonna need a printer and printer paper to print your pattern. Next, you'll need a regular pair of scissors to cut out that pattern. Then you're gonna need matching thread for your fabric. Next, you'll need tailor's chalk or a pencil for marking. You'll need fabric shears or a rotary cutter. You also need thread snips, or scissors work just fine. 3 yards of your choice of fabric and an ironing board, and that's it. Oh, just kidding. You need a sewing machine, obviously, and if you want, a serger. Step 1, cut pattern pieces. It took me about an hour and a half total to print, tape, and cut the hoodie pattern. And for your reference, here are my measurements. Step 2, cut fabric. You should have 6 pattern pieces. And again, I used Kona cotton to make mine and Alyssa's lounge sets because it was the only fabric that matched our beanies. So here we have an optional step. You can serge the edges. It's just something that makes me feel better about the interior of the garment, and it just looks clean. So you can skip this if you want. Step 4, assemble hoodie. With the wrong sides facing, sew the hoodie pieces together using a 1-inch seam allowance, and then press the seams open and top stitch them with a 5.0 stitch length. As an extra step, I rolled my hem to hide the serging, so that's what I'm doing here. This kind of took a long time and I royally messed it up. You'll see in a little bit. So don't forget to change your stitch length to 5.0 before you start sewing the top stitch. And this is what I was talking about earlier. I don't really know what I was doing, so we redid that, and when I say we, I mean me and my handy dandy seam ripper. So next you're going to hem the front of the hood using a 1-inch seam allowance. I rolled my serged end in first and pressed it, and then measured the 1-inch seam allowance from there. And then I pressed that too, so it was nice and crisp. And don't forget to use a 5.0 stitch length when you complete this step. So this is what it should look like when it's finished. I didn't want to include the hoodie strings, so I opted out of that step. Step 5. Attach bodice front and back pieces. Attach bodice pieces at the shoulders with the right sides facing and use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Also make sure that your stitch length is at 2.5. Press shoulder seams open and top stitch with a 5.0 stitch length. Here is what the top stitch looks like. And then I'll flip it over and this is what the inside looks like. I didn't hide the serged edges. Next, you're gonna sew the side seams using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance again. Also make sure that your stitch length is 2.5. Press the side seams open and top stitch with a 5.0 stitch length. And if you want to hide the serged edges, just use a 1-inch seam allowance. I did this for Alyssa's hoodie, but not mine. Step 6. Assemble sleeves. Hem the end of the sleeves by folding in 1 inch and then tuck in the serged edge. Hem using a 5.0 stitch length, and this is what it should look like if my camera ever focuses. There we go. Next, you're gonna fold the sleeve in half so that the right sides are facing each other and sew them together using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then repeat this step on the opposite arm. Step 7. Attach sleeves to the bodice. So the bodice piece should be wrong side out, and then you'll turn the sleeve right side out. Insert the sleeve into the arm size so that the right sides are touching. And then go ahead and pin or clip them together and sew them using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I just start sewing at the armpit of the garment and go all the way around. And then once you're done with that, you'll repeat this same step on the opposite arm. And then just make sure that you're using a 2.5 stitch length. And once you are done, go ahead and flip it so that the right side is facing out. And this is what it should look like. Step 8. Hem and crop the bodice. So you're gonna try on the bodice and decide how much or how little you want to hem it. And for reference, I ended up folding about 4 inches so that the front bodice measures 14 inches in length, which is from the top of the neckline to the bottom edge. So after I finished marking where I wanted the hem to be, I ironed the crease and then pinned it and then hemmed it using a stitch length of 5.0. And then I didn't hide my serge edges for this part, but I did on Alyssa's, so here's what that looks like. Step 9. Attach the hood to the bodice. I marked the center of the back bodice piece so that I could match the center of the hood to the back of the bodice. And I marked the center of the front bodice piece so that I could match it to the front overlapping portion of the hoodie, because you're going to want to attach the hoodie to the neckline of the bodice so that the front of the hoodie overlaps. Go ahead and sew these together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and make sure your stitch length is set to 2.5. And here is the finished product. So for reference, I used the 8/10 size, and for Alyssa's I used the 4/6 size, and the head hole was really tiny. So if you're using any size under the 8/10 size, I would recommend making sure the head hole isn't too small. And please enjoy this video of me and Alyssa in 3, 2, 1.
That my best friend, she a real bad bitch, got her own money. She don't need no nigga on the dance floor. She had 2, 3 drinks, now she twerking. She throw it out and come back in. That's my best friend, she a real bad bitch, drive her own car. She don't need no lift in a strip club. No, my girl gon' tip, now she twerking. She throw it out and come back in. Beep, beep. Is that my bestie in a tessie? Fresh blowout, skin on town, she ready. That's my best friend, she a real bad bitch, drive her own car. She don't need no lift in a strip club. No, my girl gon' tip, now she twerking. She throw it out and come back in hot.
Bye. Later. See ya.